Shalom, WJC family. It's time for our weekly Torah Talk. This week in Shul on Shabbat, we will be doing the special reading for the 7th day of Pesach. And on the 7th day of Pesach, historically, we are celebrating the parting and crossing of the Red Sea. I wanted to take this moment to talk a little bit about doing things in steps and not taking shortcuts. And to express that, I want to share an example that I read recently in a book, not yet published, by a friend of mine, J.T. White. It's actually not about Torah per se, it's about making digital products. And in his book, he brings the example of products that didn't quite make it the way you might have thought. And one of the examples he brings is Siri. Maybe you have had this experience in the past. You've said something like, "Hey Siri, tell me where's the nearest gas station." I should have turned my Siri off before I started this. And Siri responds something like, "Looking on the web for dwarf elephant gestation." You say, dwarf elephant gestation? What are you talking about? Tell me where is the nearest gas station? And it says, looking on the web for gaseous indigestion. And no, that's personal stop, right? And it just doesn't seem to work properly. Now, your Siri probably hasn't done this in a while. But if you had Siri when it first came out, it definitely did it. And it made Siri not much more than a novelty act. Well, do you ever wonder why that is? I mean, when you think about voice recognition technology, like what could be more powerful than being able to talk to your computer or your phone and have it do what you ask? As people, we really like to use our voices to explain things or give commands or ask questions. We're used to that. Much more so, actually, than we're used to playing with our thumbs. So when this hit, it was huge. As a matter of fact, as I learned in the book, Siri was originally released as an independent app in Apple's App Store. This was, I think, 2010. Apple was so excited about it, they snatched it up and a year later put it in all of their iPhone 4s. The problem was it wasn't ready. Right? It wasn't ready. The microphones weren't up to standard. The technology wasn't up to standard. And so we all used it. We all found it to be pretty inadequate for the task that it was. And it became a novelty act. You could a novelty act. You could ask it, hey, Siri, what's the meaning of life, the universe, and everything? And it might respond with a great reference to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But it wasn't very good for more than that. Now, everyone thought it was pretty cool still until 2015 when Amazon released Alexa, and suddenly everybody realized how useful this technology could be or should have been. So what was the problem with Siri? Well, it was that it was rushed to market because Apple thought it was novel and cool. The problem is that it never built from there. Now, in my iPhone 12, the microphone is better. Stereo technology has been improved, but it still wakes up half the time when I call my kids, Simi or Gabi. The lesson that we can learn from this is that sometimes you just can't take shortcuts. And when you do more harm than good. I was thinking about this while I was reading a wonderful book by Rabbi Avram Twersky called Lights Along the Way. And Lights Along the Way is a commentary, actually, on another book called the Mesilat Yesharim by Rabbi Chaim Luzzatto, or the Ramchal. In the Ramchal's introduction to Mesilat Yesharim, he's talking about Musar, or the practice of trying to perfect ourselves spiritually, or at least better ourselves spiritually. The Ramchal mentions that it's got to be done by steps. He brings a quote from the Talmud that says, step by step you have to do this. The quote is from Avodah Zarah 20b, A quote from Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, who says, Torah leads to watchfulness, watchfulness leads to diligence, diligence leads to cleanliness, ... Sanctity leads to holy spirituality, and holy spirituality leads to resurrection. Pretty great goal. And there's a few more steps along the way. Now, the importance isn't exactly, for our purposes, not exactly what each of those steps means. The importance for our purposes is the idea that you have to go in steps, that there is an order towards spiritual growth, and you can't skip it, you can't jump. In order to illustrate this point, that there are no shortcuts to spiritual growth, just like there are no shortcuts, I guess, to digital products, Avram Twersky brings a great midrash that's relevant to our Torah reading this week. The midrash teaches us that for the Jewish people, the Israelites who left Egypt and arrived at the Red Sea and then saw the sea part and went through on dry land, that for those Israelites, even for the one who was the least spiritually attuned, even for the one who was caught up in the material world and had no real connection with God, that in that moment, when they were crossing the Red Sea, they had a prophetic vision, prophetic insight of the divine that was even greater than the prophet Ezekiel. And for anyone who's read the prophet Ezekiel, you know that his visions were out there, right? This is like major otherworldly kind of visions. And even the one who was the least attuned to holiness in the world was at that level. So what's the problem with that? 3 days later, right, after crossing the Red Sea, what did the Jews immediately start to do? They turn to Moses and they start complaining. Why did you take us out of the land of Egypt? In Egypt, we had cucumbers and melons to eat. Now we're in the desert. What good have you done us? Now, how do you go from being as prophetically attuned to the spiritual world and the divine as Ezekiel, and then just a few short days later be so totally unable to connect with the spiritual around you? And the answer is, according to Rav Twersky, and I think according to the lesson that we're getting from this, is that you can't take shortcuts. Yes, you could have an amazing spiritual experience, but if you are not prepared for it, if you haven't done the background work on yourself and on text and on understanding the spiritual in the world, you'll know you experienced something special, but 3 days later, it'll be gone. It'll be as if it meant nothing to you, just as it was for our ancestors who left Egypt. What was true for them is true for us. We need to approach our spiritual growth and development step by step, point by point, so that when we are faced with a Red Sea-like experience, or quite frankly, something even a little less, but in a more spiritually attuned state, perhaps we'll be able to understand it better. That's a powerful insight. And one that is so important for us today. I think in so many ways we're looking for that quick fix, right? We just want things, feed me the spiritual information or experience that's going to fix all of the things that make me feel alienated from the spiritual in my life, all the things that make me feel far away from God. But the truth is that doesn't happen overnight. You can have a special experience, one you remember forever, and we still remember to this day, 3,500 years later, the crossing of the Red Sea. 3,500 years later, we remember that we experienced something special. We mention it every single day in our davening. But that's all it is. We can do better. And we do better by taking that step-by-step approach to the spiritual in the world, to the spirit in us. We're now in the period known as counting the Omer. Counting the Omer is counting every day, starting from the second night of Passover all the way until Shavuot. Today is the first day in the counting of the Omer. Today is the second day in the counting of the Omer. When you see this video, it will be the 5th day in the counting of the Omer. And then we count the weeks. Right, next week this is 1 week and 1 day in the counting of the Omer, 1 week and 2 days in the counting of the Omer. Why? What is the message that we're getting? The message we're getting is leaving enslavement, or our spiritual narrow place, which is what Mitzrayim means, and getting our 50 days to Shavuot and standing at Sinai and having revelation. It takes steady growth, step by step. One tool that our sisterhood, led by Glenna Lee, has given us this year is our Making the Omer Count, which you can sign up for, I think, for a small donation to sisterhood on our website, to learn a little Torah, a little spiritual insight every day, so that when we get to Shavuot on the 50th day, we'll be ready for that revelation on Sinai. But it's also a reminder that in every way we need to learn little by little, taking on just enough that we can process and understand, and then go on to the next step. And when we do, that ultimate sense of God in the world, that ultimate sense of what is spiritual and who we are spiritually, is there waiting for us. May we all count the Omer every day. May we all learn a little something about ourselves and about spirit in the world every day. And when we arrive at Shavuot this year, may we arrive there with a sense of readiness for enlightenment and for redemption that is there for all of us if we just take it step by step.